Jenkins. I'm a business consultant. I am also a tax strategist, and I've been in the finance industry for over 18 years. As a solopreneur, right, or someone who's an entrepreneur. Hello, Five Family. Welcome back to another edition of the Tax Takeover. I'm super excited because tonight I have a special guest joining me, and we are going to be talking about employees versus contractors. And this is definitely a hot topic because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs get in trouble when not knowing how to properly treat an employee versus a contractor. And so I definitely wanted to have an expert on who could come and talk through it with us, letting us know what it is, how we're supposed to treat them, so that we can avoid those tax penalties or even lawsuits, right? So again, tonight's episode is going to be a little different than what we talk about week over week, but definitely something that is very much needed for the entrepreneurs today, okay? But before we go any further, let me introduce myself for those who are joining for the first time. My name is Samara Andrews. I am your tax strategist for the duration of the show, The Tax Takeover. And we have a motto on The Tax Takeover, and that is that the wealthy don't start tax planning once they become wealthy, but rather use tax planning as a tool to grow their wealth, right? And so that's what the tax takeover is all about. We come before you week over week, bringing you tax strategies so that you can start tax planning no matter where you are on your financial journey, all right? So without further ado, we want to make sure that you, before we jump into it, make sure that you have your pens and your pads ready. It's going to be a lot of good content for you to take note of tonight, and we want to make sure that you are engaged in the comment section. So put your questions in the chat, and we will be sure to address them throughout the live, all right? So without further ado, let's welcome to the stage our guest, Cynthia Jenkins. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. Can't wait to get into it.
Yes, me too. So, before we jump into it, do you mind introducing yourself to the Five Finance family?
Of course, of course. So again, I'm Cynthia Jenkins. I am an HR professional. Been in the HR world for about 10 years now. Before that was more accounting and finance. But I have been in corporate HR, if you will, for close to 10 years and just branched out on my own here recently. So just really seeking to help small businesses and entrepreneurs really get their HR right from the beginning, right? Build that foundation and just be a good HR source and partner for those who need it.
I love that. And I love the wording that you're using, right? Being a partner. That's what we do too at Five Finance. We partner with our clients, right? Because we're in this together. And I felt the same way. Like I fired my boss too, right, in 2020, because there was a need for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and I wanted to make sure that, they were doing accounting the right way. So I'm pretty sure that's your same passion, right? Making sure these small businesses are doing HR the right way.
Absolutely. That is the goal.
Absolutely. So tonight's topic is definitely a hot one, Cynthia, because I feel like a lot of us need help on understanding what contractor versus employee and when we should choose to choose. So I'm going to ask you some questions that I know will definitely get a good conversation going. And so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So first, can you explain the fundamental difference between a 1099 independent contractor and an employee?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most basic way of thinking of the difference between an employee and a contractor is so your employees are going to have their taxes withholded from the company itself, right? So typically when you have a new employee, you go through an onboarding process. You're going to fill out your typical tax forms, your federal W-4, your if you're in Georgia, your state G-4. You're going to submit that with your onboarding paperwork. The appropriate person is going to put you in the payroll system, and they're going to withhold taxes accordingly, right? And then at the end of the year, you get that W-2 form, which you then use to file your taxes. So that's where you get the W-2 employee term from. On the flip side, your independent contractors are quite the opposite, right? They don't go through an onboarding process. They don't fill out those tax documents and turn them in for processing. Taxes are not withheld for them. They are responsible for their own taxes. So they get the 1099 at the end of the year as opposed to the W-2. And of course, they use the 1099 when they go to file their own taxes, file and pay for their own taxes. So that's kind of the basic different tax difference between the two.
I love that we started with that, right? So just to recap, everyone, all right? So the main difference is how the taxes are treated for the individual. An employee, the employer is withholding taxes, right, for that employee. And then those taxes get filed either on a monthly, quarterly basis. It really just depends on how big your payroll is. And then for the 1099 or the contractor, guess what? You're not withholding taxes for that person. That person is responsible for their own taxes. So that is the key difference when we talk about the tax implications. So thank you, Cynthia, for breaking that down for us.
Absolutely.
So the next question, what are some factors, right, now that we understand the tax implication, what are some factors or criteria that typically are used to determine whether a person should be classified as a 1099 independent contractor or an employee?
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's something that we often struggle with, right? But there's some really important main differences. The first and foremost is the employment relationship. Okay, that's the big one. So let's talk about the differences in employment relationship between the two. So employees, you're going to set their schedule. Maybe the employee is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They have a specific schedule and they're expected to show up for that particular schedule. And then, you have things like an employee handbook. Employees are expected to adhere to company policies, whether that be an attendance policy or dress code, general workplace conduct. The employee is expected to adhere to that. And then, of course, if they don't, there are repercussions, right? There's disciplinary action usually involved in that. On the flip side, of course, independent contractors have an entirely different relationship, right? They generally set their own hours. They're not being told when to come to work. They don't have a set schedule. They might have specifics in the contract itself as far as hours that they need to work based off the client need, things of that nature. But typically they get to determine how and when they perform the work. And then, of course, they don't have to abide by an employee handbook because they're not employees. So they don't have to worry about attendance policy. They don't have to adhere to the dress code policy. Typically, independent contractors are wearing their own branding, things of that nature. So definitely a big difference in their relationship. The second thing is the pay structure. So that's also a big one. The pay structure for an employee, of course, is set when they become an employee. So, they get entered into the payroll system and they're paid for their hours worked, whether that's, an hourly pay or a salary, but they're paid every time payroll is run, right? Every time, the payroll schedule comes about, whether that's every week or biweekly or once a month or what have you, they're paid every time. The pay structure for an independent contractor, of course, is very different. Typically, your contractors are invoicing for services performed, so they're not put into the payroll schedule. They're not paid biweekly or weekly or monthly like employees are. They're paid based off of their invoice and the specifications in the contract that they signed when they took on the project, right? So definitely a big difference there in the pay structure. And then the third thing is benefits. As employees, we enjoy great benefits depending on what the company offers. Your um, health insurance, your 401ks, your vacation time, your holidays, things of that nature. Employees are typically entitled to whatever benefits the company offers, whereas independent contractors are not. They're not
Mm.
going to enjoy those benefits. They don't get the holidays off, or well, they might get it off, but they don't get paid for it, right? They don't get paid holidays. If they don't work, they don't get paid. They don't enjoy the health insurance benefits and other 401k things of that nature, because independent contractors are providing their own insurance, right? They're expected to have their own workers' comp, their own health insurance, and everything else that employees might get from the company. They're required to get for themselves. So again, employment relationship, pay structure, and benefits are three of the main things to think about when it comes to the differences between the two.
Okay. And I'm glad you said that about the relationship, right?
Mhm.
Because I know that I have come across a situation where there was an employer who was paying someone as a contractor, but had a schedule, right? They told the people,
Mhm.
hey, you got to show up at 8 o'clock. And furthermore, something you didn't mention, but I think that it's in the law, but you tell me. Also, if they're providing them with all the equipment and the tools to do their job, like, isn't that kind of getting them in hot water as well? Because isn't the contractor supposed to provide like their own equipment and tools to do their job?
Yeah, I mean, typically they are for sure. I mean, there can be situations where, maybe there's something client specific that,
Okay.
some kind of equipment that might need to be used. So that's definitely a possibility. But generally speaking, yes, the independent contractor will provide their own equipment, their own tools, and of course their own expertise. They're
Mm.
not being trained on how to do a
Ah.
particular position. They come with their own set of expertise that apply to the specific contract that they're working.
And there you go. That's the other
Mhm.
one, right? That this person was violating as well. Was they were actually putting these people through 2 weeks training, right? Providing them with the van that they needed to go run all of the errands that they needed to run, and telling them when they had to report to work and when they had to clock out, but yet paying them as a 1099 contractor. And so I knew a little bit about the law, right? I knew enough to know that, like, that's not right. You could get in a lot of trouble. But I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are just not aware, right? So especially like if there are any gray areas, right? So that's my next question. Like, is there ever a situation where it could be hard to classify whether someone would be a 1099 contractor versus an employee, and like how are those situations resolved?
Yeah, and that's a common thing. We as HR professionals hate to admit it, but yeah, misclassifications are super common. You don't know what you don't know, right? And unless you have a dedicated HR professional to kind of stay on top of the laws and regulations, then yeah, classifications or misclassifications are definitely going to happen. They're a strong possibility, but one of the areas that I hear quite often is industry standard,
Mm.
especially in the service industries like construction or installations, things of that nature. Your industry standard is to have your workers as independent contractors, but
Mm.
what I have a hard time explaining is just because everyone else is doing it doesn't make it right. So that's a one of the major areas when you talk about misclassification is
Industry
the
standard.
service industries, yeah, for sure. But then another one is work from home. It's
Mm.
very common for both workers and employers alike to think just because you're not reporting to a physical office means you're automatically an independent contractor. I see that
Mm.
all the time. But again, that goes back to that employment relationship and the pay structure and the
Mm.
benefits and things of that nature. Just because you work from home definitely does not automatically classify you as an independent contractor.
Wow.
Yeah, so again, very very common to have these misclassifications. But then I think my absolute favorite is going to be personal preference, right? So I can't tell you how often I have employers tell me, "Well, I just don't want to pay them
Oh my
benefits,
gosh.
and I don't want to pay their taxes, and I don't,
Mm.
I don't want to give them the 7 federal holiday." I get it all the time.
Wow.
And even on the flip side of that, there are workers who say, well, I want to be a 1099 contractor
Yes.
because then I don't have to worry about paying taxes during the year. So it goes both ways. But,
Right.
that's another common misconception, is that you can choose if
Right.
you want to be an independent contractor or an employee. And that's just simply not the case.
Yeah. And I'm
Mhm.
glad you mentioned that about the flip side too, because I actually, when COVID happened, I think it confused a lot of people, right?
Mhm.
Because when COVID happened, a lot of employees who used to go into a business and clock in or sit at their desk and do their work, now those same employees were told, hey, you take your laptop home, you set up and you're in the comfort of wherever is comfortable for you in your home, right? You use your electricity, you use your internet, and we expect for you to log on at 8 o'clock in the morning and be available until 5, right? And so, what I found during COVID is that a lot of people were coming to me as taxpayers and saying, well, can I write off my home office as a? I said, no. Do you have a business? They were like,
Really.
no, but my employer is making me work from home. I said, okay, but that's your employer, right?
Mhm.
So, like, unless you have some agreement where they are reimbursing you for your internet use or reimbursing you for, some of your electricity use, like, I'm sorry, you can't write that off. Like, that is a tax strategy for someone who owns a business.
Mhm.
And so it was very, I can't tell you how many times I had that conversation. I lost clients because I wouldn't do it. And I was like, well, yeah, please go ahead and go to someone. Like, I'm telling you, that's illegal. You cannot do that.
Mhm.
But yeah, there were a lot of misconceptions that were out there. People were saying it like on social media, in these internet streets. People were telling people, oh, you can work from home. Now that you work from home, you can write off your home office deduction. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so false. So I'm glad that you also are in agreement with me. Like, it
Mhm.
depends on the relationship. It doesn't matter where you are working from. If that relationship is an employee to an employer, then guess what? That's what it is.
Mhm.
And so, and vice versa, if it's a contractor to, just somebody who hire you to do a one job, and that's it, then that's what it is. So, thank you so much for like breaking that down. But I'm telling you, COVID, I think, confused a lot of people.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yes. Okay, and so then the last question that I have was, okay, in the context of taxation, right? I know that there are some risks, right, that are associated when you do this wrong. When you treat a contractor like an employee or vice versa, right? So I won't ask you about the tax implications, but I do want to ask you rather if you can give us like one scenario or one case where you saw like an employer get in trouble, because I tell people all the time you can get in trouble. But I think it's one of those things that since I've been doing it for so long and this is the industry standard, right? Everybody else is doing it, then this is the way that I'm going to operate, right? But I want them to understand that there are consequences. Yes, am I right?
Absolutely, 100% correct. And it's funny with the industry standard, it works both ways. So
Mhm.
I've learned in my 10 some odd years in HR, it just takes one person to mess up that industry standard, right? So
Mhm.
you have one person file an FLSA claim, and I guarantee you're going to see 10 more follow it. Okay. So be careful of that. But yeah, so to kind of name some of the risks and the penalties associated. So Workers can file claims. There's a 2 year limited statute of limitations, excuse me, on
Oh.
FLSA claims. So even if someone left you, let's say 18 months ago, they can still file a claim. And then even worse, it is 3 years if it can be proved willful. So,
Mm.
very interesting. But yeah, so I mean, I've seen FLSA claims settle for upwards of 10, 20, 30, up to $50,000. That's for settlement. But
Wow.
you're looking at back pay for overtime wages due. You're looking at liquidated damages, attorney fees. It's not cheap. It is not cheap to make this type of mistake. Misclassifications are taken very, very seriously, and there's some definite repercussions for doing it incorrectly. So yeah, I mean, you're monetarily, it's extremely dangerous. But if we get on into that willfulness that I was talking about, there could even be jail time associated with that. So
Oh,
it's no
wow.
joke. It's nothing to play with. You want to make sure that you get your employees classified correctly so that you can avoid any kind of claims like this being filed.
And when you say willful, can you explain to the audience like what that means?
Mhm. Yeah, so we all make mistakes, and if
Mhm.
you don't have a dedicated HR partner or professional on your staff, even you have no idea that you honestly have no idea that you're misclassifying workers. That's considered to not be willful. On the other hand, let's say somebody files an FLSA claim in, I don't know, 2020, and it kind of comes to light that maybe additional employees are classified incorrectly, and you knew nothing about it. You do absolutely nothing. You don't reclassify them. You just leave it as it is. You say, oh, I'll just settle this one case, and we'll be fine, and we're just going to leave everybody else how they. So you continue
Wow.
to misclassify your employees after knowing that you do have them misclassified. That can be considered willfulness.
Wow.
And not to scare anybody too much, but even if you don't, even if you are innocent, and you just you had no idea that they were misclassified, if you don't have the proper documentation in place, you may still be considered willful, depending on how good your lawyers are. So yeah, there's definite risk there. Absolutely.
Wow, wow. And it's funny, like I wanted you to explain the whole difference between like willfulness and, just, oh, I didn't know. Now, here's the thing though, right? What do they tell you? Ignorance of the law is not a good defense. So, either way, right? I feel like there will be some consequences for your
Mhm.
actions.
Mhm.
But I do also know that those people who are saying it's the industry standard, right? That can be them willfully knowing, even after someone like yourself, Cynthia, tells them, no, that person should be treated like an employee. Like, that is not a 1099 contractor. And then they go against your judgment, right? And continue on. Like, that's them willfully, not doing what they know is right, right? Committing
Yeah.
an illegal act. And I'm curious that when they have cases like this, I wonder if they ever call on like witnesses. Like,
Absolutely. So
yeah.
I have been fortunate enough not to have ever went officially to court over any of these cases that I've seen in my professional career. But yeah, your witnesses most definitely
Oh,
are
wow.
called if it comes to that. They're lawyers are going to look at your employee handbook. They're going to look at your offer letters. They're going to look at your contracts. They're going to look at everything that
Wow.
you have for either your 1099 contractors or your W-2 employees. So absolutely, you can be proved willful for lack of documentation or incorrect documentation. There's all kinds
Wow.
of possibilities there.
Right. So, with that being said, it sounds like whether you have employees or you have contractors, you need to talk to an HR professional just to make sure that you're not misclassifying either one, and to make sure that you have like a proper contract or documentation in place that clearly outlines who this individual will be operating as and what their responsibilities or duties are. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Absolutely, 100%. In the HR world, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen.
Okay.
Same thing for your classifications, right? You should have proper vendor files for your 1099s, which, there's multiple documents in there that it needs to include, and the same thing for your W-2 employees. There's specific documents that need to be on file according to the IRS and the FLSA and a couple others that you need to make sure that you can produce if it comes time. So for sure.
Wow, wow, wow. And then one more follow-up question because I remember you said that they're going to review the employee handbook. Now, what if you have employees but you don't have an employee handbook? Is there a fine associated with that? Like, can you get in trouble for that?
Um, there's not a fine that I'm aware of. Employee handbooks are not required by law.
Oh, okay.
They are best practices.
Okay.
And again, that's going to be one of the first things that any lawyer is going to ask for when
Right.
you have employment related cases. But no, they are not required. But it's going to be useful on both sides because
Right.
generally speaking, for employees, you should have some kind of handbook acknowledgement, right, for an employee.
Right.
Whereas for 1099 contractors, you better not have an employee handbook
Right. Right.
acknowledgement, right? Because they shouldn't have ever seen it because they're not an
Right.
employee. So,
Right.
it's important both ways.
Yeah, and I remember back in corporate, like at some jobs, you had to sign the employee handbook. You had to
Mm-hmm.
sign
Mm-hmm.
it. You had to date it. HR took that little piece that you signed, they ripped it off, kept it on their in their files. So that was you acknowledging that you received
Mm-hmm.
it and that you understand and that you are agreeing to adhere, right, to the guidelines in the handbook. So, yeah, definitely, people, even though it's not requirement, I do believe that we should all be practicing best
Mm-hmm.
practices, right? We should all implement best practices in our business. I do the same thing from an accounting aspect, right? So even though my clients aren't these Fortune 500 companies, like I set up their chart of accounts in a manner where it reflects best practices, right? Because I learned from the big boys, right? I was going to say big dogs, but I learned from the big companies, right, on how to do things the right way. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just the best practice outlook. So I'm glad that you said that and you cleared that up, that it's not required, y'all. But if you have employees, it's definitely best practices because it's going to help everyone just make sure we're on the same page, make sure that you understand the culture of your business. Like you can put that in your employee
Mm-hmm.
handbook. I think that's really important, especially for small business owners when you're starting out to make sure you just have a clear direction for everybody. Well,
Absolutely.
this has been a great conversation, Cynthia. I truly enjoyed it. So please tell us, like, how we can we follow you on social media? Do you have social media sites?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. So I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can find me under Elevated HR Consulting.
Okay.
Please feel free to check out my website. All my contact information is there, www.elevated-hr.com.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm definitely open to any follow-up questions that might arise from this conversation. And please feel free to reach out to me for sure.
All right, so y'all heard her. You can follow her on social media, but you can also check out her website. We have it on the screen. It's Elevated HR Consulting, and I love that she used purple, y'all. I didn't choose her just because of that, but we connected on the purple vibe because finance is all about that purple love too.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
so
Gotta love purple.
gotta love purple. It's regal. It's regalness. That's what it is. But I again thank you so much, Cynthia. Like I said, I know that this is a hot topic. It definitely is much needed, especially in the small business community. And I think for taxpayers as well. Like because COVID, I think confused a lot of us. And so, just having this clear understanding of why you are treated as an employee versus a 1099 contractor, and what that means from you from a tax implication, I think is really going to help a lot of people. So again, thank you so much for joining us for tonight. Um, so I am going to ask for you to wait backstage for me while I wrap things up, but I will be with you shortly. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Five Family. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation tonight. So again, I know that you were engaging in the comments. We definitely did our best of answering all of the questions that were in the comments. But thank you so much for rocking with us tonight while we had our special guest. I hope that this was helpful. Definitely, if you know an entrepreneur or a business owner who could benefit from this conversation, please make sure that you are sharing this video with them, right? And before you leave tonight, make sure that you are liking the video and subscribing to our channel if you haven't done so already. Make sure that you are also turning on that notification bell button so that you can be notified whenever there is another video that we're going to post, right? So our YouTube is up there now, so make sure that you're hitting that notification button. Make sure you're also following us on LinkedIn. We are in the social media streets as well, so we post a lot of content on LinkedIn and Facebook. And last but not least, if you want to connect with me on a personal level for a tax planning strategy or for a FI discovery call, make sure that you are visiting our website www.fivefinance.com, and you can book a discovery call or a tax strategy call with yours truly. All right. So, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Tax Takeover. I hope that you found it informative and helpful. And until next time, you all have a blessed and wonderful Tuesday evening. And don't forget, start tax planning today. See ya.